Alright guys, so in the next few videos, we'll be taking a deep dive into each of the market structures we learned about earlier. Today, we will be learning all about perfect competition. But first, let's just do a quick review about the characteristics that make up perfect competition. First of all, remember that a perfectly competitive market has very many small firms selling identical products. This gives them no market power, which means no ability to change the price. Also, it's very easy to enter or exit the market. As we talked about earlier, a pure perfect competition market is theoretical, but some examples that come close would be currency exchange or most agricultural products. And let's use agricultural products as our example. Let's say you have a mango farm, but of course, you aren't the only one that produces mangoes. Anyone with the resources could buy land and start growing mango trees. It's not that hard, meaning there are no real barriers to enter the market. So this means there are many other farmers that also sell mangoes, and the mangoes you sell are no different than the ones that any other farmer sells, meaning the product is homogeneous. Okay, so now we have our conditions for a perfectly competitive market. Let's start to examine it in more detail. Here's the standard supply and demand diagram for mangoes. You should all be very familiar with this one by now. Remember, this shows us the supply and demand for the entire mango market, but the individual diagram for your private mango farm is going to look very different. Here's why. Remember that you have no control over the price. In a perfectly competitive market, there are many other mango farmers that sell the same exact mangoes you do. If you raise your price even a little, all your customers will buy from other farmers, and your demand will drop to zero. And hopefully you remember that when a change in price drops the quantity demand to zero, we call this perfectly elastic, and the demand curve is a horizontal line at the level of the price. So, because you have no control over the price, you are a price taker. You must accept the market price, whatever it may be. This means you, along with all the other mango firms, have no market power. This is why demand is equal to the price. But since the price is fixed and all units are sold for the same price, this means that price is also equal to the marginal revenue of each additional unit sold. And if you remember from the last video, price is always equal to average revenue. Therefore, in a perfectly competitive market, we can label our demand curve as being equal to price, which is equal to marginal revenue, which is equal to average revenue. Some of you look confused. It's okay. Go back and watch the previous video on Unit 2.11.2, where I explained the market structures in more detail. Okay, up next, we need to talk about profit maximization. Remember, in economics, we assume that the rational producer is always trying to maximize profits, or at least minimize losses if the firm is not profitable. We need to further break down profit maximization into the short run and long run. Remember, the short run means that at least one input is fixed. This means that the number of firms in the industry is also fixed, because to enter or exit a market, a firm must vary all of its inputs. This sounds more complicated than it actually is, but think of it this way. The land for your mango farm is leased, and you pay a monthly rent. This is a fixed cost. Even if you don't produce any mangoes, you will continue to have to pay it until your lease expires or you come to some agreement with the landowner. In other words, the land is a fixed input and will remain a fixed input until the lease expires, and then it becomes variable once again. And it is only after you make all your inputs variable that you can exit the market. Before that time, you will still have fixed costs to pay, which would result in a loss if you stop producing. Therefore, a firm will continue to produce and sell their product in order to at least cover these losses. By definition, there will always be at least one fixed input in the short run, which means firms cannot enter or exit the market. This is why we say that in a perfectly competitive market, the number of firms in the short run is fixed. Okay, now back to profit maximization. Since a firm in a perfectly competitive market is a price taker, they cannot influence price. Instead, their only option is to adjust their production output to the quantity that maximizes their profits. This output quantity will always be at the level where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The firm then needs to compare average revenue, which is equal to the price, with average cost. This will give us the profit per unit of output. Since we know that profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost, we can simply divide that by the quantity to give us the average profit. This can also be written as average revenue minus average cost. And since price is equal to average revenue, it can also be written as price minus average cost. Now, to calculate the total profit, you simply multiply the average profit times the quantity sold. And remember, we're talking about economic profit here, so any positive number is called abnormal profit. A profit of 0 is normal profit, and a negative number is called a loss. Let's take a look at these 3 diagrams that show the 3 different types of profits. Notice how regardless of the profit type, all 3 are producing at the profit maximizing level, where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. The first diagram shows abnormal profit, and this happens because average revenue, which is the same as the price, is greater than average cost. This results in a positive total profit. The profit per unit is the difference between the price and the average cost, and then total profit can be calculated by multiplying profit per unit by the total number of units produced. So whenever you see a diagram where the price level is above the lowest point on the average cost curve at the profit maximizing output, then you know that the firm is making abnormal profit. The second diagram shows us a profit of 0. But remember, in economics, that's a normal profit. This happens because average revenue is equal to average cost at the profit maximizing output level. We can see on the diagram how everything intersects at that point. That's an easy way to tell that it's a normal profit diagram. And the last diagram shows us a loss. This occurs because the price level has fallen below the average cost curve. Since the firm is not making a profit, they're looking to minimize their losses, which again will be where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, when we subtract the cost from the price, we will get a negative number, since the cost is higher than the price we are selling. This is negative profit, or in other words, a loss. So whenever you see a price level that is less than the lowest point on the average cost curve, you know that the firm is making a loss. Now let's look at profit maximization in the long run. Remember that in the long run, all of the firm's factors of production are variable. So then the number of firms in the industry is not fixed. And due to the very low barriers to enter the market, firms are entering and exiting the market as they wish. Okay, so here's a confusing part, but hang with me. In the long-run equilibrium of perfect competition, all firms earn 0 profit. Let me explain. Going back to our mango farm, let's say for whatever reason, the price of mangoes went up, and now the price or average revenue is greater than your average cost. Now, in the short run, this means you will make an abnormal profit, but that's only because the number of firms is fixed in the short run. Now we're in the long run, and firms can enter or exit the market as they wish. And what do you think is going to happen when they see the price of mangoes shoot up and see all the mango farmers making a lot of money? That's right, they're going to want to enter the market to get in on that sweet action. So suddenly, you'll have new mango farms popping up everywhere, which will increase supply. And what happens to the price when supply increases? Yep, the price will drop. So now that abnormal profit you were making before disappears, and you're back to 0 profit. But due to a lag in the cause and effect, too many mango farmers entered the market, resulting in a surplus of mangoes. This drops the price way down below your average cost. Now you're losing money. But remember, all the other mango farmers are also selling at that low price, so they're all losing money too. Because of these losses, some firms are going to go out of business, or more realistically, switch over to a more profitable product like strawberries or watermelon. Either way, the supply of mangoes would then decrease, which would then raise the prices, eliminating your losses, and once again, you'll be back to 0 profit. As you can see, everything eventually returns to equilibrium. And in a perfectly competitive long-run equilibrium, a firm's profits and losses are eliminated since revenues are just enough to cover all costs. This means that every firm receives no profit, which is called normal profit. And from the diagram, you can see the equilibrium price is at a level that intersects the lowest point on the average cost curve. And this is really the main point that illustrates why perfect competition is the best for society. Think about it. This strong competition means that the price is the lowest that firms can accept. This gives the consumer the cheapest price possible that producers are willing to accept. And since the producers can't control the price, they are incentivized to cut costs in order to maximize profits. This means they will find the most efficient way to produce, which minimizes wasted resources. This is all due to competition. As you'll see in the upcoming lesson, the other market structures don't have as much competition. This means that firms can raise prices and earn abnormal profits. Sure, that's great for the firm, but this results in a welfare loss for society due to wasted resources. And this brings us to the next point, allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency is achieved when marginal benefits are equal to marginal cost. In a perfectly competitive market, D, which represents MB, is equal to the price. Therefore, we can say that allocative efficiency is achieved when price is equal to marginal cost. Remember, the consumer is willing to pay the price that reflects the value of the benefits they receive from consuming an additional unit of that product. Marginal cost measures the value of the resources used to produce the additional unit of the product. When the price the consumer pays for the additional unit is equal to the cost the producer pays to make that additional unit, there is an equality between the benefits of the consumer and the costs of the supplier. This means there is no waste and each party is getting exactly what they want. This is allocative efficiency. And to understand it better, it may be useful to imagine a scenario when allocative efficiency is not achieved. So what if the marginal cost is higher than the price? This would mean that the cost to make the product is higher than the value of the benefits the consumer receives from the product. This means that there is an over-allocation of resources going to the production of this good. Society doesn't value it very much and wants less, but resources are being wasted by producing a good that society doesn't want. On the other hand, if the price is higher than the marginal cost, this means that the value of the benefits received by the consumers is more than the cost of production. Consumers want more, and in order to give the society what they want, the suppliers should increase their production, even though this would also increase their production costs. But until the supplier increases production, there is an under-allocation of resources going towards the production of the good. This is also a waste in terms of the opportunity costs involved by not utilizing resources. So, as you can see, resources are only allocated in the best way when the price of a good is equal to the marginal cost of producing it. That's going to be where P equals MC, but that's for the firm. How about for the whole market? For that, we need our old standard supply and demand diagram. Just like before, allocative efficiency occurs where social surplus is maximized, which is right here at the equilibrium point. But it's also where marginal benefits are equal to marginal costs, because remember, the supply curve is a cost curve and the demand curve is a benefits curve. The achievement of long-run allocative efficiency under perfect competition is a key distinction between the other market structures, since it's the only one that results in allocative efficiency. As you will learn in the upcoming videos, all the other market structures result in market failure to some degree. Okay, now it's time for the evaluation. As I mentioned before, perfect competition is theoretical and doesn't actually exist in its pure form, but we can still use the model as a standard to measure other market structures against. So this evaluation will be a little bit different. Instead of the usual advantages and disadvantages, we will look at insights and limitations of using the perfect competition model. The first insight is how allocative efficiency can be achieved, giving society what is best when price equals marginal cost. This leads to low prices for consumers, which, as you'll see with the other market structures, isn't the case. Moreover, Perfect competition causes inefficient firms to exit the market. This creates a survival of the fittest scenario where only the most efficient firms survive. Any firms that cannot cut their costs by producing as efficiently as possible will not last long in a perfectly competitive market. The next insight is that a perfect competition market structure responds better to consumer tastes. As you know, changes in consumer tastes and preferences are non-price determinant that shifts the demand curve. But in a perfectly competitive market, remember price is equal to demand, so a shift of the demand curve will also shift the price at the same time. This will cause short-run abnormal profits or losses, encourage more firms to enter or exit the market, changing the supply and therefore the long-run equilibrium that will reflect what the consumers want. No other market structure can respond as efficiently as perfect competition. But how about the limitations of the model? Well, the biggest one is that perfect competition is theoretical, as I said earlier. It's based on unrealistic conditions that are rarely, if ever, met in the real world. The second limitation is economies of scale. Firms in a perfectly competitive market, due to the immense competition, can never grow big enough to take advantage of economies of scale. If they could, this would lead to lower average costs, but it's just not possible under perfect competition. Up next, in a lack of product differentiation, it is assumed that all firms in a perfectly competitive market produce identical goods. Obviously, in the real world, that's just not true, nor would you probably want it to be true. Each individual consumer will have individual tastes and preferences, so trying to have a one-size-fits-all approach to production wouldn't make anyone happy. Consumers prefer product variety. The next limitation is a limited opportunity for research and development. Remember that we are dealing with firms whose revenue barely cover their cost. They are trying to cut costs wherever possible and produce as cheaply and quickly as they can. This means that they won't have much time or money to put into research and developing ways to improve their product. And even if they did, this would differentiate their product from their competition and would therefore no longer fit the definition of a purely perfect competition market structure anyway. And that's going to be all for the evaluation, which will complete this lesson on perfect competition. Make sure you're able to explain all the learning objectives and get ready for the next lesson where we will learn about monopolies and the market failure they cause. Until then, as always, thanks for watching and leave your questions in the comments.